All right, everyone. Once again, we're having another one of our animator interviews, and today we have Stephen Gordon. Thanks, Stephen, for being here with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Usually the first thing I kind of ask people is, what is some work that maybe my students might know of yours?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm best known for X-Men Evolution. I did the
Okay.
character designs for that, and that was 25 years ago, I guess, something like 26 years ago. And I was also the character designer and key animator on Swan Princess, which had a whole home life on its own. It didn't do well in the theaters, but it, spawned like another 12 sequels or something. So
Okay, great.
that's, and let's see, what else? I was one of the character designers on Marvel's Eyes of Wakanda, which
Okay.
was about a year ago, I think, came out or something, or maybe less, 6 months on. My first job was Lord of the Rings for Ralph Bakshi, the animated version. I mean, I've got,
I know you have a very long
yeah. So, but
history. You have an
I'd say
IMDb
that,
page, very long.
yeah, X-Men Evolution and Swan Princess are probably the things that get the most traction.
Sure.
So,
So usually, I always kind of start with where does your love of kind of animation or art and design come from, do you think?
well, as you were discussing earlier, I had no intention of getting into animation. That wasn't even on
Okay.
my uh, list of things to think about. I wanted to get into illustration, and so I was heavily involved in illustration and checking that out and whatnot. And um, I fell into animation and haven't left, obviously. Well,
Sure.
now I'm technically retired, but I been doing it for almost 50 years. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I, kind of grew to appreciate it. But, as a kid, I always watched animation just like every other kid. The Hanna-Barbera stuff and the Warner Brothers stuff and all that stuff. So I always liked it and appreciated it, but I didn't see myself doing it. So,
So, did you go to school for art and animation, or it sounds like you went for illustration, right? Or
well, no, I didn't
okay,
do any of that. I was
okay,
getting ready to go to start submitting my portfolio from high school to Art Center of Pasadena. That was the main
okay,
goal because they were kind of the big ones back then. Um, in fact, they were the big ones. That was where you wanted to go if you wanted to actually learn something
sure,
um, and earn a living after it. But I did not get there. As I was putting together my portfolio, my art teacher, who's working as sort of my counselor as well,
hmm,
um, or advisor, I guess, saw an ad in the trade papers looking for portfolio submissions. So she thought that would be a great idea for me to send in what I had and get a reaction from them. And also because I was that kid in high school, the one who was the art student, the one that everyone came to
right.
for all their art needs and stuff. Every high school has one. I assume that's still the case. And she thought it might, you know, put you know, pop my bubble a little bit and, give me a little ego check. So I did submit it, and she was wrong on both accounts because no one gives you portfolio reviews. They either hire you or they return your portfolio in those
Sure.
days. And I got hired, so that obviously didn't do anything for my ego in her regards. But once I got there, it did work out because I did realize that I had no business being there. I just got lucky. So
Sure.
so that's pretty much it. I didn't, like I said, never went to school.
Okay.
I was all on the job for the most part. Took classes here and there, but I don't think in retrospect they helped anything. It
Okay.
was
Sure.
mostly learning on the job that got me where I am. So,
Yeah, I mean, I do think I mean, obviously as a teacher, I'm a little bit biased to say that,
well, yeah, I
teaching is good, but yeah, I mean, I always
nowadays I think it's different. I don't think you can fall into it like I did.
sure. Well, I also tell people like I can teach you all day long, but there's no substitute for doing. So it's
Yeah,
like
Sure.
like,
And not
yes,
everyone has their own learning capacity too.
right.
I think I learn best when I am told what to do and have a deadline and have
Sure.
money that
Some
I'm
people are
trying to
like that.
acquire. Yeah. So
Okay, so sorry, which studio did you get in?
that was Backsheet Productions. My first gig was on the animated Lord of the
That was
Rings
the Lord of the Rings. And where
in
was that? That was
1977.
where was that was in LA
It
or
was, yeah, it was
okay.
actually in Hollywood. It was I don't know, are you familiar with Hollywood?
Am I not sort of. I mean, I've been
No.
there, obviously.
Okay. That doesn't matter. It was down it was on
People
Sunset
list
and
cities and I'm
Vine.
just kind of like I just assume they're suburbs of
Yeah, okay. No,
LA.
no, this is that. It was specifically Hollywood that the job
Okay.
was at. It was at Sunset and Vine across from
Okay,
the
yeah.
Cinerama Dome. So,
Sure. All right, so you work on Lord of the Rings and then do you stay with the company or do you kind of go off from there?
well, I stayed with Ralph for that film, obviously, that which was a long film, and then I think I came back on when he was getting up of American Pop. I
Mhm.
returned and he was doing American Pop, but prior to that, he had brought some people back to help him finish Hey Good Looking.
Okay.
And so we worked on that for a while until American Pop was ready to go. And then I helped animate on American Pop. And then, you know, worked whenever he had a gig, I would come back and work with him.
Sure.
So, I think after American Pop, I went and worked at Filmation for like 9 months or something.
Which one
And
of the Filmation ones did you work on?
I worked on mostly the Lone Ranger. I
Oh,
mean, I
okay. I
worked
didn't even
in,
know they did that one, but that doesn't
yeah,
surprise me.
yeah,
That sounds like something they would do.
yeah. Basically, it was along the lines of their Tarzan and
Yeah,
Flash Gordon and so forth. I mean, I think they combined them all together or something in some hour of
I'm sure they did.
something. But yeah, so I worked there, and then I returned. He called me and hired me to be the animation director on Fire and Ice,
Okay.
which was with Frank Frazetta. So
Um, so I mean, you have a long career, I mean, in
mhm.
different areas. I mean, you do animation, and then later on, obviously, you kind of say how your biggest, what you're known for these days is probably more your character design.
Yeah.
What's it? How did you? What do you like about the different roles? I mean, you talk about being an animator, you talk about being an art direct, a director, you talk about being a character. Like for you, what's the pros and cons or the joys and sorrows of each kind of role?
Well, it was the first thing I did, which was be an animator, a 2D animator. But there's nothing quite like seeing your actual animation on the big screen moving
Sure,
and it all finished and pretty and everything. That's quite something. I mean, it's also great just seeing it moving and even in a pencil test, but
sure,
seeing it
sure.
on a big screen is just, the goal, and you can't get enough of that. Um, and the other jobs, I mean, are very fulfilling off and on, depending on what they're for or who they're
Sure,
with
yeah.
and whatever. But I enjoy storyboarding to some degree. I think I'm a better director than a
Okay,
storyboard artist, but I think being a storyboard artist helps being a director.
okay.
And
Can you
characters,
expand on that a little bit? Why do you think that? What about
well,
storyboarding helps being a director?
I think you start to develop your own sense of what you want and what you like. And
Okay,
also, I think you're working with other directors above you as your storyboard artist helps clarify what what works, what doesn't work, what your thinking is, and what you're trying to get across and such. Um, so I think that's a big part. And frankly, I think even being a 2D animator helps
Mhm.
with all of that too, because you know what is animatable, what it works, what how to move characters around. Even in
Sure.
storyboards, you have to know the right poses and so forth, and what will play, so forth. I mean, the people that have never done any of those and suddenly are directing out of the blue, or have only storyboarded for a short time or whatever, I gotta imagine that they're always questioning themselves when they're directing. Whereas I think in my case, because I've done so much of the work prior to that and up below that, that I
Mhm.
have a very good sense of what I exactly want when I'm
Okay.
directing. So
And you kind of attribute that to your storyboarding practice and your
yeah,
animating
I think
skills.
to my animation and storyboarding,
Sure.
I think that helps a lot. So, and as far as character design, I mean, that's always great because you kind of feel like you're setting the look and the tone for a lot of the stuff you're doing, which is nice. It's a great way to
Mhm.
work. But I think also a character designer, in my opinion, should also have been an animator, especially 2D character design. I think if you haven't been a 2D character or 2D animator, then I think it's very difficult to be a good 2D character designer. I think you don't know what you don't know then.
Well, can you expand on that? What do you, how does being an animator help?
Knowing
Is it
how to
about sort of
move
like not
things.
giving not having too many like movable parts, like don't give people 10 legs and 10 arms, or is it
Well,
something
I mean,
else?
not. I mean that if that's part of the job, to
Sure,
create a character, with 10 legs or whatever, that's fine. That's all part of it. But
sure.
it's other things like, but along that same path, which is like, what can I animate easily?
Mhm.
What,
Right.
am I going to want to have a character with plaid a plaid shirt?
Yeah, yeah. That would be a
That
pain
type
to
of thing,
do.
or a shirt like yours, that
Right.
you're
Yeah,
wearing
that
now.
would be a
It's
pain to
like you
do.
want to avoid those types of things.
Right,
But
right.
also, it's a matter of knowing how things work in 3 dimensions. Even though
Sure.
it's 2D, you still have to think, how does this
Still has
thing
to have
rotate
solid
and go?
drawing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You have to know how this is going to wrap around the character and how it's going to work in motion and stuff. I mean, and you can still make plenty of mistakes. I have,
Yep.
but at least you've got a better understanding of it as opposed to just coming up with pretty graphic look and stuff, and that which then leads the animators to just saying, okay, I'm just going to trace this model sheet and flip it, or
Yep.
and do whatever. It becomes less fun for the animator at that point if the designer hasn't been an animator because you're basically putting the crosshairs on the animator and saying, go ahead, animate it.
Right.
And if it's not easy to animate, my goal whenever I do character design is like, will I be able to animate this if I had to?
Right.
And that's to me a very important aspect. And for a character designer to not know whether he can animate something or not and just figure, well, they'll figure it out, I think
Right.
is shooting the animator in the feet.
Right.
So, or
Right.
in the face, but
Sure.
anyway, so that's where I am on all that. So,
I hear you. I mean, you've had a very long career doing various things. Is there any sort of thing you attribute to your ability to sort of stay in the industry this long? Is it a love? Is it knowing how to be with people? Because that's always a big part of it. I always people say
sure.
like, you have to get along with, you got to be good
Oh,
at getting
yeah.
along with people. Like,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely. I mean, 2/3 of this business is networking
sure,
and how you get along with people. And, you get about, and frankly, after being in the industry as long as I have, and, people that have been in it as long, we all get reputations at some
sure,
point or another. I mean, you know, just because, that's the way the industry works. It's a very high school,
right,
juvenile attitude in a lot of ways, and a lot of gossiping and a lot of backstabbing that if they can do it and stuff. So you have to be resilient and not have a thick skin. You can't have a thin skin. You have to be able to put up with stuff, and you have to. In my case, I found the best way to stay in the business is by learning other things. And I've
sure,
known artists or animators that's all they could do. They were brilliant
sure,
2D animators or whatever, but that the minute 2D animation went away in a big way, then they didn't know what to do. So,
right, yeah,
some of them could, some of them tried to transition into storyboard. A lot of them couldn't, which always surprised me. But it's important to be able to do other types of jobs. And I think the same goes right currently with the CG stuff. I think just being a CG animator, I think is not enough. I think you have to also know other aspects, whether it's wireframing or all
Sure.
kinds of different things. So,
Well, I mean, you and I were talking about my friend Arnie, and that's kind of what happened to
mhm,
him, where he originally, when we met, this was like 2004-ish, and he
okay,
was really struggling kind of adjusting to digital animation. And so he kind of went more toward storyboarding, and that's really where a
right,
lot of his, sort of 2000s work was really more in, less animating and more storyboarding or kind of being a director kind of thing, because
sure.
he just had trouble with programs like Adobe Animate and Toon Boom and stuff like that. He's a great animator, but I think, and I get it. As I get older, I find myself like, I don't know if I try to stay up on technology, but it can be hard. You can
Sure.
sometimes feel
Well,
a
you
little
get
bit
set in your
underwater.
ways too.
Sure.
It becomes memory, muscle memory too, to some degree. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people were not able to make the leap from 2D animator to CG animator. Some did
Right.
it brilliantly, like James Baxter and Dale Bear and some of those people, but a lot of them just couldn't. And I was never given the opportunity to learn it on a project. And
Mhm.
that's how I learn best. I mean, I'm not a do it at home and figure it out person. I'm a person who's like, oh, you hire me and show me how to
Sure.
do it. I will learn
Right,
it
right.
and do it. And at one point, Disney was doing that and DreamWorks was doing that when they all switched off. They had classes and stuff to try to bring all their animators up to speed, and some made it and some didn't.
Sure. No, but I agree with you that, like, learning how, but it's also like it's about diversifying, but also taking the skills that you know. I mean, not to say that storyboarding and animation are the same, but they apply a lot of the same
Oh
concepts
yeah,
of
oh 100%.
drawing
Yeah,
and, perspective and color theory and, other things that, maybe it's not literally animating, but you're still, you're setting a scene,
sure. Well, like I said before, I think if you were a 2D animator, you would be a better storyboard artist than if you hadn't been. And same with
Sure,
character design and director and stuff. I think knowing other aspects and being pretty good at them will help you on other jobs.
sure. So, we talked about, you kind of diversifying your career. We talked about, some of the various roles you've done. Let's say I have a student, my students, as I mentioned off screen, are kind of like they've taken one class, like intro to animation, I sometimes teach 2D, I sometimes teach 3D, it kind of depends. Let's say a student came up to you and they said, I took a class in animation and I'm really enjoying it. I want to kind of, go off from here and learn more. It doesn't mean necessarily get a job, but like learn more. What would you tell that student in terms of what
Well,
should their next step be, do you think?
I think uh, continue taking classes. There are some online schools that are pretty good from what I gather. And I
Hmm.
know some people that have done those and some that teach them and stuff. I think that would be the next step is getting a refined one-on-one type of experience if they can find it or find a mentor, even
Sure.
if it's not in school or something, But it's difficult to learn on the job these days. I don't think
Right.
anyone's getting hired to learn any longer. I think that those days are gone. They may come back, but right now that's not the case.
Sure. So your advice is kind of just, get more experience, take more courses,
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
deepen your
whether it's your
knowledge.
school or some other
Sure.
or an online school, I think the one good thing about the fact that a lot of people are having trouble finding work is a lot of them are teaching
Sure.
online stuff. So there's plenty out there. The unfortunate
Right.
thing about it is that they can't find work, so it's going to be difficult for the student to find work too.
Sure.
So,
Um, so this is a question I always kind of ask people, and you can answer it however you want to answer it. You can answer it from a sort of industry point of view or from a kind of animation as an art form kind of point of view
mhm.
or idea. I always kind of ask people, where do you see animation going
Boy,
in the
right
next, like,
now,
say, 15, 20 years?
that's really hard to judge right now in
Okay.
time because the industry is in such a state of flux
Sure.
that it's difficult to put a finger on exactly what's going to happen. Um, and I've seen a lot of these other people that are older than me or whatever and say, "Oh, the industry goes through these cycles." Like, no, this is not a cycle. I mean, I've been in the industry almost 50 years. This is not a cycle or part of the cycle. This is a like a reset.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure where it's going to go. I do not believe AI will have much to do with it other than below the surface as far
Sure.
as production AI and stuff like that, process AI. I don't think Gen AI will survive because I think it's already scraping bottom and twirling
I don't
down.
think it survived mostly from a financial standpoint for the companies that do
Exactly.
it.
I mean, it's just it's insurmountable that it's going to be cost effective.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
I
mean.
don't
Yeah.
think it's just, I mean, between the environmental issues and everything else, I don't think that's the problem with the industry right now. I think
Okay.
that's just kind of nipping at the heels of and causing a lot of people to be worried. But I think what the problem is right now is that Hollywood has kind of upended itself with streaming.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bigger conversation about economics, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening right now. I mean, especially animation, where you have a combination of AI, although I don't think that's not to say it's helping, but it's not as big of a problem.
It's not as big a problem as I think a lot of people want it to be.
Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems, as I can see, and I'm not in the industry, but outsourcing, you can
That's yeah,
you
but
can
that's still
find really
animation
good,
though.
like maybe 15, 20 years ago, I mean, outsourcing has existed forever. It's not like
Yeah, sure,
anything
sure. I mean,
new.
on the very first film I worked on, we were
Yeah, but
outsourcing.
it feels like now it's like you can do almost all of the work in like South Af I interviewed a studio in South Africa, and it's like I
Sure.
looked up how much an animator makes in South Africa, and a top animator
Zero.
makes
Yeah.
like 20, 25,000 a year. Now, I don't
Yeah.
know much about the living costs of South Africa. Maybe that's good money in South Africa, but it's like it's hard for an American place to compete with, when,
No, no,
you know,
and that's always been the problem, and that's why outsourcing has always existed.
right.
But I mean that is part of it, but that doesn't really change what animation is to the public.
Sure, no, I understand. I'm talking more about people finding work in
Right, exactly. And that's
like
yeah, in right now it used to be Southern California. And to some degree Northern California, but
Sure,
mostly it's Southern California. That's where the hub of animation was, and that's not the case any longer. And I think some of that has occurred because of the COVID shutdown. When
sure,
the studios closed, they discovered that, we don't need to watch everyone and make sure they get their
right,
time card stamped and that they're sitting at their desks. It's like they still do the work, which I think
sure,
surprised them, and in a way it kind of screwed up a lot of their thinking because I think they thought that, well, we need to watch them because they're irresponsible and stuff, and
right,
and I think they discovered that's not the case, and so then they took it then to the next thought. It's like, do we need to hire them so they're even close by? Or can
right.
we hire everyone all over the world? Because if they can
Yeah,
work
hire
at home,
people in
why
other
can't they
time
work?
zones as long as they
Yeah,
can,
exactly.
connect to the internet. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
understand.
exactly. And I think it's in some ways become the perfect storm uh, against people in the animation industry, as far as California at least, is
And
that,
another, yeah, and another thing
digital
about,
and outsourcing and everything
yeah,
else. It's just screwed everyone up.
and then like there's just literally, when you have consolidating media giants, there
Yeah,
just
all of
literally
that. Yeah,
becomes less competition. So it's like if everybody owns everybody else, and it's like, well, then they're not competing because they don't have to. So they're
yeah.
just not going to make as many,
Oh, sure. Yeah,
they're
because
just
you
not
can
going to make
shut
as many
down
movies
Blue
because they don't
Sky.
need
Yeah,
to. They'll make two
yeah,
or three that they want to make. And then, so you're not getting, all this, you're not funding these smaller projects or,
sure. Well,
and
and
that
also
just means
streaming
less
has
work for
worked into
everyone.
that too, where suddenly all these streamers going, how do you make money at this?
Yeah,
When Netflix, I mean, Netflix is one of the few that can make money at it, but even that in a lot of ways, they kind of hurt the industry even more by overspending, by hiring, they doubled and tripled the union size. because
Right.
of the projects they intended to make. And then someone finally got around to looking at what they were doing, going, what are you doing this for? We can
Right.
buy animation from Europe, or,
Right.
and we don't have to make it specifically ourselves. We can still kibitz on it and tell people what we want if we're giving them money, but we don't have to actually have an animation building and have it filled with animators.
Right.
So I think all of that has happened. And Netflix is actually one of the ones that know how to make money at streaming, whereas like HBO and all these others are still floundering around and Peacock and stuff, and they're going, we don't know how to do this. So we
Well, another
shot
thing that
ourselves in the foot.
a lot of things I follow I'm kind of like a tech guy. I
Hmm.
do tech work and I do like web development too.
Hmm.
And one thing that happened in the tech industry, and it's probably also hitting here, is like from 2014 to about 2021, interest rates were really low, like super low.
Sure.
So, you could basically borrow money and then just throw it at some projects. And, the idea that like 9 out of 10 projects will fail, but the one that doesn't is going to make you a lot of money
It'll cover
and
everything.
it'll cover your loan. But then in 2021, interest rates really went up from about 1.5 to about 7, 8, something like that. And that's when all of a sudden, if you're someone who watches, everyone is like, why did Grammarly or all these other products suddenly get worse? It's like, well, they all lost their money. They
Yeah.
all like they were getting free money, and then now their parent company's like, dude, you guys got to start making money now. We're losing out on this. We can't afford to borrow more from the bank. And so that's when a lot of apps and things went away. And I'm pretty sure I'm not a Hollywood guy, but I'm sure Hollywood was doing the same thing
Oh,
where
sure. Yeah.
they were borrowing money. You get the pandemic, everyone's home. It was like this perfect storm of low money, everyone's home watching Netflix. But now that that's gone, people aren't watching Netflix as much because they're working and the interest rates aren't as high. And now all the media is consolidating. You get, it's kind of this perfect storm of
Yeah.
like,
No, yeah.
there's
Oh,
just
yeah. I
less
mean,
work.
there's so many reasons that why the industry is in turmoil. I mean,
Right.
the one bright note is that because of the software that has been developed, someone can go home and work at home and create their own little animated thing if they want. Like if you've
Sure.
seen Aaron Blaze's thing or the Snow Bear, and
Right.
there's all types of stuff, and that's kind of a big version of it, but there's others that they do crappy or not crappy. I don't mean to say,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I understand.
tiny little ideas that they may have
Personal
had
indie
and
stuff,
would,
yeah.
yeah, never would have ever done anything with except maybe occasionally try to pitch it. Now they can make it at home and get and some of them can get someone interested in it, like that
Sure.
Has Been Hotel and all that, there's stuff out there that's like it came out of someone's um, home studio and stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, there is that bright side, and that's probably where a lot of animation will be for a while
Okay.
until the studios kind of get their act back together. And assuming they do, at some point they've
Right.
got to, because they've got to, continue funding their own CEO bonuses too. So the stock's not going to always be able to do that for them. So they have to figure out how to make money. So, but I don't know when that will occur. It's not going to happen within the next year or two, I don't think.
Sure. Um, so, as we kind of round out this interview, actually, one thing we kind of talked about various roles. You're one of the few people I've interviewed who's a character designer. And
Mhm.
I kind of wanted to ask you, what do you think, let's backtrack a little on my questioning here. What do you think makes, or what are skills that a character designer needs? Or what makes a good character, what makes someone a good character designer in your opinion?
Uh, well, flexibility helps.
Okay.
But in my case, I think having been an animator, I think helps me be a good character designer, a better character designer. Um, but I think just working with someone and understanding anatomy, I think is important, even if you're not doing human-ish characters. I think
Mhm.
it helps if you understand how things work and move, which is
Right.
part of me being an animator helping and understanding what's appealing. Of course, used to be I would look at character design portfolios and critique them. Now I'm very hesitant to do that because if you look at some of the stuff that's being designed, it's just like never in a million years would I have ever thought that that would be acceptable.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's gotten very strange and good for the people doing it, but
Sure.
it's like it does not at all have that appeal to it, at least what I recognize as appeal.
Sure.
Obviously, other people must, and the public must see
I
it,
think it's just different
but I don't
generations.
see
Every
it.
generation has their own
Yeah, well,
music
sure.
and culture. I
Yeah,
must admit,
yeah,
I never thought the anime style would be as popular as it is in America now,
yeah,
as what, but that's the way things have gone for
yeah.
various,
But
cultural
in
reasons.
some way, I mean, at least I can recognize that as like it's not my style, but I recognize that
Right.
as having a certain solidity and appeal to it.
Sure. No,
Whereas
I get
you see stuff like Adventure Time and stuff, and I look at it and go, I don't get it. I don't see
it.
why
Sure.
wouldn't you hire a real character designer instead of what looked like you hired your nephew or something to
Right. I get you.
who's
I
still in
understand.
junior high. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm wrong. It's very successful, but still, it's that type of thing. Was like I don't necessarily go out of my way to critique character design because I think it's not. I mean, I can critique people and say, if I were hiring you, I would ask you to do X, Y, and Z. Or
Sure.
if you know, you were working for me or you wanted to draw like me, I could critique you. Otherwise, I can't critique you just because I have no clue. It depends on who is paying the money and wants to see whatever.
Sure. Um, so as we kind of finish up, do you have any kind of advice for my students or people who are interested in animation as a whole? I know we kind of got a little doom and gloom there
Yeah.
in the end there, but
Well,
let's try to round it out.
yeah, no, that's fine. But like I said, I think right now, if it hasn't been for the downturn in the industry itself, I mean, there's software program out there that is great and useful, and you can do it on your own. I would learn the software. The main ones are like Harmony and
Right.
for animation and Storyboard Pro, which
Sure.
I'm not a fond of Storyboard Pro per se, but it is pretty much the TV industry standard. You need to learn that. At one point, you could wing it and fake it. Now you actually need to learn it and be capable of it. And having some ability in Photoshop, I think would help
Sure.
someone in the industry. I think the software is out there. Some of it's not affordable per se, but all of them
Sure.
have student pricing on it and stuff.
Sure.
And I think that I think is good. And I would get all of that under my belt as much as you can. I mean, there's other animation programs that I think are worth getting as well and learning. Once again, the more different programs you learn, the better you be. Just like if you're into CG animation, I think you can definitely pick up and learn a lot of the different CG programs and such and learn how to do those. I think whether you're in class or doing it at home, I think those are available to you. Whereas
Sure.
before you'd have to just sit down and create your own uh, animation disk setup or whatever and table and try to learn that way. And then maybe never ever see it filmed or whatever. Whereas with all these programs, you can at least see it moving and see what's working and what's not
Right.
working. So I think it's a great time to do it. I just wish there were job opportunities out there right now.
Right.
So
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think we all
sure.
kind of learned a lot and kind of learned a little bit more about the different aspects. Do you have like a website or anything you'd like to plug or anything like people can
Yeah,
see of
I've got a
yours?
web. Yeah, I'm all over social media to some degree.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, which is I think how you found me, and
It is.
um, I am on Facebook. But I've also got a website. Um, if someone is interested, they can Google my name, Stephen E. Gordon, and they
This
can
will be
find
this
me.
will be posted electronically, so I can put a link to
Oh,
your
okay.
channel
Yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
easily
If
access
they
it if
if
you want
they
to.
find my website, they can then find. I also have a store that I sell prints at, and I go to a lot of Comic Cons and stuff, and table there and
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
So yeah,
Very
so
cool.
I see quite a few people. In fact, I'm trying to think. I think maybe I now that I'm thinking about it, I think I may have seen Arnie at a con, maybe at San Diego or
Oh,
something
really? He
recently.
never really
I'm
struck
trying
me
to
as a guy who would go to a con, but maybe he did.
maybe maybe I'm blanking. It's kind of
Arnie seems
tingling at the
too
back of my
like,
head.
I love Arnie, but Arnie seems kind of too lazy to do that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just
Or
thinking.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
Yeah,
because I like when I've known Arnie, he really kind of more pushes his art, not his like kind
yeah,
of his animation stuff. Like he'll talk about his animation stuff, but
yeah.
I never really see him try to sell anything. It's more like his kind of
Well,
painting.
I don't. When I say saw him at a con, I don't mean he was
Oh,
tabling
okay.
there
Just
or
like was
anything
hanging
like
out.
that. No,
Yeah.
he wandering, and I think he may have come up and said hi, but I don't. You see so many people, and if especially San Diego, it's such a flurry of
Right.
craziness
Sure.
that you kind of feel like after the 5 days, you feel like you've gotten off a bender, and it's hard to remember anything specific. So
Yeah. All right. Well, so
anyway,
thanks. Thanks so much. We really appreciate all your time.
no problem. My pleasure.